Hello and welcome everyone. Thank you for logging on and attending today's virtual program. My name is Matt Schumann. I'm on the programming team here at Cary Library. Before we begin, just please use the chat function to let me know if there are any technical issues I can try to resolve. Questions can be asked through the Q&A function and we will address them at the end. This program is also made possible by generous donors to the Cary Library Foundation. With us today is Ashley Rooney and Elaine Doran. They will be talking about sun and shade gardening. Ashley is the past president of the Lexington Field Garden Club, and she will be introducing Elaine. Ashley will also be back next week, May 27th at 1 p.m. for a program about pollinator gardens with Georgia Harris. So please welcome Ashley.
Hi, everybody. With me today, as Matt said, is one of Lexington Field Garden Club's gurus, Elaine Doran. She and her husband, Guy, who recently spoke on container gardening, container vegetable gardening, are lifelong gardeners. Moreover, she has great taste. She was the brand new president of Morning Study Group and noticed that the Minuteman statue was quite bare back in the 90s. She suggested that the club plant it with flowers. So in 1990, when the statue had no plumbing, the group members actually carried water over there and watered the geraniums, the pansies, whatever flowers were there for several years. Luckily for us, the town put in water. And luckily for us, the Dorans are still doing the planting there, and the club still takes care of it. So let's talk today about flowers, which she is really excellent in. Elaine, you're on.
Well, hello, welcome, and thanks for having me here today. Today we're here to talk about sun and shade gardening, whether it be in the ground or in containers. We have lots of good advice, suggestion of plants for you to try. And Ashley, why don't you tell me what you'd like to start with? Would you like to start with a sun garden or a shade garden?
Well, I think the first one on the share screen is a shade garden. If I can, here's a shade garden. Do you see it?
Nope, I don't see it yet.
No.
So I'll just talk a little bit while you're looking for the photo.
It was there. It was there.
Oh, so there are. Oh, here it's carrot comes.
There's the sun garden. Sorry.
Oh, there's the sun garden. Okay, so this is an early spring garden. It happens to be at Ashley's house, and it's a predominantly bulb garden. So I'd say it's probably early May that we're looking at this. It's a variety of tulips, and we have some sedum popping up there and some Shasta daisies in the background. I see some hyacinths. So this is nice early spring color. As the bulbs die back, you can also fill in with annuals for color to get you through the rest of the summer. And also some of the perennials that are just popping up will fill in. This is a shade area, a little corner that has bright open shade. So it's not dark shade under a tree, it's bright shade, very open, but not sun, not full sun at all. So there's a variety of ferns. There are so many different types of ferns here and others that are not shown. There's maidenhair here, cinnamon, Christmas fern. There's also an annual fern in a clay pot that is called Kimberly. And that is as a house plant that gets put out every season. And there's also a hellebore that's to the right of the little rabbit statuary piece. So it's a kind of a cool, nice place to sit on that bench and enjoy a shady spot. And you want to show another photo? So there's quite a variety of things you can do with shade. And if you have a little, if an area that would be darker shade or deeper shade, the ferns would still work and the hostas, but you might look for some different plant material to put in there as well, more woodland type material. How about we look at the photo of the perennial garden for another sun option.
Is it up?
Nope.
No. Okay. Well, one of the things while I try to find this that we should talk about is that almost all vegetables and flowers need 6 to 8 hours of full sun each day. people keep asking, okay, what can I plant? And you have to be aware of your sun. So Elaine and I were talking about, if you're not sure, you should take a picture at 9 o'clock and at 12 o'clock and at 3 o'clock to see what kind of sun you actually have and what's going to work in your garden.
And take into consideration things like large trees that might block the sun. Even if your southern exposure, you might have trees or a fence or something that's blocking the sun from directly hitting the garden. So you need to consider that as well.
No, sorry. Oh, this is not easy. You were screen sharing. There it is. You see it?
Yes, can we make that zoom? Can you press the little zoom button there to make it a larger photo?
Yep, I did.
Oh, well, I see it as a small photo, but I can see it. So I think
it's just lagging a little, that's all.
So here is a corner of a very sunny perennial garden, and you can see that there's been some a shrub used, which is a great idea to incorporate shrubs into a sunny perennial garden, especially a conifer, because you'll get just aesthetically pleasing results that'll last you year round. Even in the winter, you'll have that great interest, texture, and color. Also incorporated into the perennial garden is a weatherproof 4-season container that does not have to be moved in. So that sits out there year round, and that's filled with European ivy geraniums, which will give beautiful color all season long. So there's quite a lot you can do. I don't see any annuals here. There's golden thyme in the front, as going over the front rocks in the lower right-hand corner. And that's just a lovely thing to grow on edges. It'll take some dryness. It's very happy there, obviously, and it's been in there for a while. The iris is a dwarf iris, and that just comes up in spreads every year. It's been very satisfactory. We also have a tree in this perennial garden. You can see the trunk that's to the upper right. It's a birch tree. And again, that's filling part of the space too. This was a very deep, wide garden that needed a lot of elements, different elements in it to sort of give it interest. Okay.
Okay, good. So it's really, when you're looking at a garden, you have to really figure out that sun and what your soil is all about. Yeah. Both Elaine and I are big believers in UMass sending your soil out to them, and they can check it out and tell you what you need in your soil, whether you should be adding more compost or not. I was amazed when I checked mine. They told me I had too much fertilizer. I had found a great supply of goat poop, and I was over fertilized. So go to UMass, to find out what they need.
I find the UMass Amherst extension site just terrific, and I think everybody should go online and look them up. They've really filled a void when the extension service left Waltham some years ago. They moved it out to UMass, and their website is just a wealth of information. You can download applications for soil testing, but they also can answer just about every question you have, from pruning apple trees to how much shade, fertilizer, or water a particular perennial or shrub needs. And the nice thing about it is it's in Massachusetts, so it focuses on things that are growing here. Whereas some of the other sites that you go to for help, they might be located in South Carolina or other parts of the country where they're really not tuned into our zones and our climate. So if you have questions that you're having a hard time answering, you should go onto that website, and it's very easy to use, and they have their own search engine and search box. So I highly recommend it.
So and one of the things, and Elaine worked on there, is when you pick your plants, don't pick catalogs that are from the South, because their flowers are not going to do very well in our climate. Guy Doran mentioned that Johnny's was a good place because that's a Maine catalog. You need to pick the flowers that grow in the Northeast. Now, some people pore over catalogs for months and others head to the garden center and buy what wows them. I've done that, and I have a couple of dead plants that still show for it at time.
Yeah.
Either method works as long as you choose plants adapted to your climate, soil, and sunlight. You need to know what you're doing a little bit. There are some easy to grow plants for beginners, annuals or calendula, cosmos, marigolds, so I notice the rabbits are eating them these days, sunflowers and zinnias. And then there are perennials, you know, like daylilies, lamb's ears, pansies, phlox, purple coneflowers, Russian sage. Plants can come as bulbs, tubers, seeds, and plant starts from the nursery. I'm going to try screen sharing again to see if I can get the right one. In my garden,
I was just gonna interrupt to say that someone had mentioned that UMass is actually not testing soil right now during the pandemic, apparently.
Oh, I'm not surprised. Yeah. Yeah, so that would have to be on hold for a while. Yeah, there are soil test kits available at different nurseries, but they have been found to be not that effective or accurate as sending your soil off to a real lab. So, but you could use those if you wanted to just sort of test pH. Just go for pH and nothing else. It might be something.
And be sure to put some compost in. This is my top garden, which, as you can see, I have a lot of perennials here. This is spring. I have not put my annuals in. I have now, but a week ago when we did this, the annuals weren't in because it was still too cold. So this part I'm going to fill with annuals, which will give me constant color throughout the summer. But the perennials mean that I don't have to constantly worry about them. They're going to do their thing and give it a beautiful backdrop. You need to think about how you're doing. You know, what do you want to do? I don't want to be out in my garden every day weeding and deadheading and so forth. So I need the perennials to take some of the work off my plate. And this garden way down here is all daylilies. It's a wet garden. It's mainly daylilies and iris and things that'll grow in the wet. So again, you're thinking about how it's going to work. Once you get your garden planted, and we assume you know how to plant, but we can always answer that in the Q&A. You have to water at the right time. I do suggest you get a rain gauge. All gardens need an inch of rain a week. And then you have to maintain it. Once your garden is beginning to grow, you do need to be sure they have enough water. We're going to have a week of sun here, which is absolutely wonderful after all that rain that we've had. You're going to be watering your garden. You need to weed and deadhead. It's so sad to see so many people, they have their flowers and then you just have the dead tulip stalks and so forth. Deadhead, you can take the stalks out of there, let the nurture go to the roots of it. Support your tall plants with a trellis, stake, or teepee. Elaine, you must have something to add in there.
As far as maintenance goes, or
maintenance.
Yeah, maintenance is really something to consider. If you are just looking to beautify your property and add some simple gardens and you don't want to be a slave to it, you've really got to address that and pick plant material that is self-maintaining, that doesn't require a lot of deadheading or dividing over time. Consider putting in things that are evergreen, so you'll have some enjoyment looking at it year-round instead of nothing there, or for part of the year. There are factors to consider, and I really think it's important that people don't jump in to creating a new garden just based on finding plants, that they like and they think, oh, this is going to do well here or there. They really need to give some thought as to what they're trying to do and how much time they want to put into it.
One of our gardeners in the garden club gave me an old adage, which I ran across again, which I think is good. Perennials generally need 3 years to achieve mature growth. They sleep the first year, creep the second year, and leap over the 3-year period. I thought that makes sense.
Yeah. Makes a lot of sense. Like where they're planted. Yes, hopefully that will happen. If you're happy.
I want to show here one of Elaine's plantings, which I thought was, it's a difficult hillside. It's an alpine planting she did. What can you do with difficult areas?
Well, I think you're about to show a photograph of, it's a rocky hillside, and it's the result of an addition we put on our house, and it was backfilled, and there was it's a very tricky area. It was just a bunch of rocks, and it came down to the driveway. We're not looking at the picture, by the way. Yet. I don't see it. So there were large rocks, and they were incorporated sort of into this hillside that came down towards the driveway. Maybe we're going to get it now.
Yes, it says I'm screen sharing.
Yep, you got to make it a little larger, but I think we're there. So, so what we did was we created planting pockets within the stones. We did have to add a few stones so things, mulch and water wouldn't run off. I think we're still looking for the photo, but it was mostly sand in there, and we made these planting pockets and then chose things that we felt would grow well there. Bearberry being one of them. And I think you can see that in the very front center and front right is the bearberry coming down. But then there were a number of conifers that have just been really happy there. This planting is now probably 15 years old or 18 years old. And we've added to it over time. Some things got very large, and we've been tempted to move them, such as the large pine in the up there. But I'm just reluctant. It's doing so well. I'm just afraid to touch it. And so, and as you can see, everything here is evergreen. So we have something to look at in the winter as well.
What are you using for mulch there?
That is just a, I don't use bark mulch really anywhere in the yard except for what you see here. And then we have a strip along the street that's very hard to maintain. It's sort of always just sort of gets weedy or whatever. And we'll put mulch down there in front of our stone wall. But that's just a bark mulch. I think it is, I think it's just a recycled mulch from the town, because the man who cuts our lawn got it for us, and he uses a lot of those town products.
Okay, there we go. Now, sorry about the screen sharing. It tells me I'm sharing, but obviously I'm not. That's awkward.
Okay.
We have some.
Mulches are a whole other thing. While we're on mulch. You wouldn't want to use bark mulch in a perennial garden. It would not be beneficial. In fact, it might hurt your plants. I don't recommend using bark mulch in a perennial garden. You'd want to use buckwheat hulls or a compost that either you made yourself or purchased. Coast of Maine makes a great lobster compost that's really helped us amend our soil over the years. We've used it, we used it for maybe 3 years in a row on our perennial garden, and it really did a lot to loosen up and enrich a very sort of what I call a bad soil that was a bit silty and not very, didn't have a lot of organic matter in it. I wouldn't use it consistently, but for 2 or 3 years, applying that it would help a lot.
I'm going to try one more share screen. Ugh. Share, yes. Am I up?
Yeah, this is a nice container. Again, we have that European ivy Sophie, which is such a great performer. And I know you see it in the barrels in Lexington Center, and there's a reason why they use that plant there. And at the Minuteman statue, we have it in red, because you do not have to deadhead this annual. You don't have to cut it back. All you do is water it and feed it during the summer, and it just continues to bloom its head off. It likes full sun, and it's just such a treasure of a plant. I mean, I think if you're just looking for something easy care in containers, this is the one. So they usually sell it in 5 or 6 inch pots or hanging baskets in 8 inch or 10 inch. And I'm a believer in buying the 8-inch hanging basket, knocking it out of the hanging basket and planting it in the container. It's sort of like instant gratification, and you've got this great root ball and this mature plant. If you have a large area to do and you want, or window boxes, and you want the smaller pots, those are great too. In back of that, you see a fuchsia, which is a really, again, a wonderful annual. It's called Gartenmeister, and it has this wonderful bronzy foliage and deep coral bells. It will, in this plant, the Gartenmeister will take either sun or open shade, which is one of those great plants to know about, because there's very few plants that can do both and really perform well. And this is, that Gartenmeister fuchsia is one of them. And the begonias are a whole other layer too of, there's begonias that'll do well in sun or shade. So I can talk about those sometime if you want me to.
There were two relevant questions that had just come up. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
Someone had asked, what was
Please.
the plant before the fuchsia?
Geranium.
So it's a European ivy geranium, and the series is called Cascade, and the color is Sophie. So it also comes in a pale lilac color called Lila, or it comes in a bright red, like at the Minuteman statue, called, I believe it's Bright. So those are
And then
colors.
the second question that was just relevant to what you were talking about was, why wouldn't one use bark mulch on a perennial garden if you're careful to keep it away from the plant?
From the plants, because oftentimes, I think Ashley can back me up on this. Correct me if I'm wrong, Ashley. I think the bark, the wood, can actually let off a lot of acidity and can really put that into the soil, which a lot of plants don't like.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure what it is, but I'm running into that people are really against using bark mulch near any plants at all, and it's very important.
Yeah, because it's hard to know where the mulch was made, what trees it came from also, and there's something about the wood not, I think, not being beneficial to the soil. Compost is really the way to go.
Yeah.
Whether homemade or buying, in bags.
Hartwell. Gwenda Hartwell composting.
Town has a
Beautiful,
compost.
beautiful up there.
Yep.
I just thought of one question people keep asking me.
Yes.
And I did some research on it. Flowers that rabbits don't like. I got a whole and what I realized is a lot of things they don't like are smelly. When I planted Nicotiana, which is basically nicotine, has a lovely flower. It's quite beautiful. The rabbits stayed totally away from it, probably because it smelled like nicotine. But according to this list that I found somewhere, rabbits don't like veronica, salvia, daylilies, peonies, daffodils, allium, nicotiana, bee balm, catmint, iris, lavender, hyssop. Most of these are smelly. Hellebore, but I don't know what hellebore smells. Lamb's ear, astilbe, and baptista. We have lots of rabbits in Lexington. People keep saying, what do I do about the rabbits? There's not much you can do about the rabbits. I tell my dog, see that rabbit? And he sort of looks and looks and can't find it at all. You want them to stay away. I have a friend who's growing clover in her lawn, hoping to attract the rabbits to the clover and keep them away from her garden.
That might backfire.
It might backfire. I was like, really?
There is a product. There is a product. It's an all-natural product. It's good to know about. It's called Liquid Fence. And a lot of people who live further out in the country use it and spray it all around for deer, but it's also for rabbits. And it comes in a ready-to-use bottle, or you can get a concentrate and mix it up in a sprayer. And it works fabulously. The only drawback is if you get a heavy rain, it'll wash it off and you'll have to reapply it. But the product we have found has worked wonderfully for us in helping to deter rabbits from eating clematis and hosta. You just have to remember to go out and spray, every probably week, once a week, I'd say once every 5 days. And if you get a rain, it might be a little bit more often.
Right.
I saw a question pop up about weeding.
Oh, wait, can we just stay on the rabbits for one more minute?
Oh, sure. Stay on the rabbits. Yep.
Stay on the rabbits. The other thing you can do with rabbits is like with baby hosta. They love the tender new leaves. Once the hosta grows, they don't like the old tough leaves. I take my tender plants, my new dahlias, when I put them out, I put them in chicken wire cages because the rabbits, if they're really hungry, will go after the dahlias. They didn't used to, but now they're voracious. Put chicken wire cages, they leave them alone, and then you can pull the cages off and you're all set. Now the weeding question. Go, Elaine.
Well, I need it to be read. I think they said, what can we do about weeding in a perennial garden? I don't see the question in front of me, but I think what the question was, what can I do about weeds in my perennial garden, or do you recommend any products for weeds? So there are products out there that you can safely use around other plants. Preen is one of them. I've never been a big fan of using these products. I really think the best way to get the weeds out is to get down there on your hands and knees and make sure you get the root of the weed and you dig it out. Unless you've got something like poison ivy or poison sumac or something that is just all over the place, then you really have to come out with the heavy guns and get that heavy duty weed killer and be careful about reading directions and spray it. But as far as your perennial garden goes, you want to just make sure you dig out the weeds and take your time doing it, and then apply a nice heavy, maybe thick mulch of compost around it to sort of give you deter from anything sprouting up again.
Okay, and let me take the dahlia tubers. I have started dahlia tubers in my house. Yes, you can put your dahlias out now. You can plant your annuals now. It would be really unusual if we had a frost now.
Yes.
So it's time to put all these things out. Again, protect them. They're going to need watching over in this first 2 weeks. If we have a lot of wind, an awful lot of sun, they're going to dry out quickly. And as I said, I would put cages around those dahlia tubers. Yeah. What woodland plants would you suggest? You have Elaine?
Woodland, you mean just in general, woodland plants to plant in the garden?
That's the question. That's the question.
If hopefully your woodland garden is a little on the moister side, because a lot of these wildflowers and woodland type plants do like to have sort of a moist base. You can go bloodroot. There's different types of cyclamen. Trillium for sure. Jack in the pulpit. Bleeding heart, yes. Well, of course, there's lots of different ferns and hostas. Yeah. Lamium and there are types of lamium that are not invasive. There's a nice variegated leaf one with a yellow flower that's just beautiful that would not be invasive. Let me think. Columbine would do well.
Epimedium. It depends.
Epimediums, yes. And epimediums, the great thing about epimediums is they will take really dry conditions as well. So if you have an area under a tree and you have a shady area and the tree seems to be robbing all the nutrients and the moisture from under the tree, a really nice thing to plant there is epimedium, because they don't require a lot of moisture and they will continue to spread. And there's so many different kinds. There's white flowering and yellow and pink. And there is a grower locally in Massachusetts, I believe she is, who only grows epimediums. And I've seen her at like the Tower Hill plant sale or at Trade Secrets in Connecticut. I could find out who that is if somebody wants to know, and we could post it somewhere.
Epimedium is a really beautiful ground cover too.
It is. Yes. Yes. That's yes. Yeah.
We kind of went off on you mentioned lamium, foxglove. You can do a foxglove if it's shady, or Tyrella, foam flower.
Tyrella, yeah, foam flower. European ginger is really easy to grow, and it's beautiful. It's got that round, shiny green leaf and spreads very nicely, very easily. That's a good one to know about. And Solomon seal, all the different Solomon seals. There's false, there's true, there's variegated, there's dwarf. There's just a whole family of those guys.
They make a lovely background. I have them in my garden. It's a lovely background for other things.
The tall ones do. There is a dwarf one that makes a lovely ground cover. It's very short and it's adorable.
Right.
Yeah.
And I like goat's beard. For deep shade, goat's beard is wonderful, especially if you want to, it grows tall. It's about 5 to 6 feet. It has a flower like in a still beet, and it's quite nice.
Yes, yes.
Now let me see. What can I plant under the shade of rhododendrons?
Under the shade, well,
I have hosta growing under my rhododendrons.
Yeah, if they're looking for ground cover, they could do vinca. They could do the epimediums for just a ground cover. Hostas are great, and especially with all the different foliage colors that you have with hostas and the different sizes, you could really create some nice interest and texture there if you just have green leaves after your rhododendrons bloom and you want a little, little interest there. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I have periwinkle under my rhododendrons out front, and it grows very well there.
Yeah, the vinca bowls probably.
Yeah. I can't answer this question, Elaine, and maybe one of the listeners can if you can't. Can somebody recommend an app that identifies plants, foliage, and flowers?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, you got one. Good.
There's 2 of them, and I don't have my phone next to me. I can't. One I think is called Plant Finder, and you can download the apps if you've got an Apple phone. You just go to the App Store, and there are 2 of them that are really good. All you do is you take a picture of the plant, and it just identifies it for you. It's just a wonderful thing to have. It's a great tool.
It's funny. I just used one the other day on a plant, and they told me it was only found in New Zealand. I thought, Turned out it was a baby hellebore, which I didn't recognize. What are the best deer-resistant flowers for part shade? Well, that list I went through earlier. Deer-resistant would be Nicotiana. Anything that smells, the deer don't like. That's one lesson I know.
That's why that liquid fence is made with garlic, so that tells you why it works. It's certainly garlic, so yeah.
And somebody wrote in on the Lexington Field Garden Facebook about taking your soap slivers, chopping them up in your blender, and then putting it around the plant you tried to protect. Animals don't go near soap.
Well, I don't know how good that works. I think I know people who've tried that, and they go to your garden and see all these little, strings with, dial soap or something hanging off.
I think this is the ground.
Whatever.
Okay, next one. I adore lilacs and would love to plant a small bush, but I see how huge they get. I've only seen one tidy lilac tree.
Yeah. Okay, so there is a lilac, a dwarf lilac that will give you all the beautiful color and flowers of a large lilac without getting big, and that's the dwarf Korean lilac. And I believe the one that I'm thinking of is Miss Kim, but you could, again, go online and Google that or go to your nursery. But we have several dwarf Korean lilacs in our yard, and some of them have been in for 30 years, and they're probably about, I don't even know if they're 5 feet tall.
And you don't have to prune them?
I prune them very rarely. Yeah.
Okay.
They have a nice compact growing habit and rounded shape. So they're a great shrub to know about. Their flowers are not fragrant like the large lilac bush varieties, but they're beautiful, and their flowers are a little smaller, but you still get the beauty and the enjoyment of a lilac in a dwarf form if you don't want to have a huge tree.
That's nice. Okay, next one. Do I need to remove the grass when making a new garden bed? Yes.
Yes, absolutely. Oh, you'll be weeding that out along with your garlic, onions, and everything else.
The best way of doing it is to do it in the fall and put down sheets of cardboard or corrugated board, and you put rocks on that and kill the grass underneath it. That really helps.
I just dig it out. I would dig it out.
Dig it out.
I was making a new garden. I would dig out all that grass because I'd want to bring in some good soil as well if I was making a new bed.
Which is, and that would be a smart thing. And it's a lovely thing to do as we get through this pandemic. A little exercise for everybody. Dig yourself.
Well, huge resurgence in gardening, if I can digress here for a minute, the huge resurgence in gardening since this pandemic started. And the garden centers have had the busiest year that they've had in ages. We know a lot of people who own garden centers, and they're all telling us the same thing. They've never had a banner year like this. And you can only attribute it to the fact that people are staying at home. Maybe they're not having a vacation, they're doing a staycation. They're doing home improvements. Part of that is to make new gardens and improve their yard. And so the garden centers have just been really busy, and a lot of people are going back to making vegetable gardens. So the Victory Garden thing is seeing a comeback after 75 years, since the Victory Gardens were World War II, of course. Everybody's familiar with that. Everybody wants to grow their own vegetables again. So seed companies are just being wiped out. You go into any garden center, a lot of their seed racks and their vegetable plants are sold out. And I think it's wonderful. I just think it's great. It's made a lot of people think about, hey, you know, there's so much more we can do around our house to take care of ourselves in a healthy way. And gardening is one of them. What could be better?
Yes. And you can have fresh vegetables. And Lexington will have a Victory Garden as of Memorial Day, the Interfaith Garden right near the First Parish Church is opening up, which is the Interfaith Garden, which feeds the food pantry, almost 1 ton of food a year, is opening up, and is going to talk about being a Victory Garden as we celebrate the 75th anniversary of the end of World War II.
That's perfect.
Yeah, it is good. I can do a movie on that this week. Can you give tips on dividing perennials? Well, it kind of depends on what kind of perennial you're dividing. If you're dividing an iris, it's kind of easy. You just kind of untwist it. And if it's a big iris, and you can plant it here and plant it there. Hostas, I just take a shovel to.
Right. You can have a very, as you know, woody root. You almost need a serrated. I've used a serrated knife on them before.
Right.
Daylilies, once you dig up that clump, you'll almost see where they separate. The fans are sort of what you call hands, and those will pull apart pretty. You'll see how easily they will come apart, how you can separate them. It almost tells you where to pull it apart. But you're absolutely right. It depends on the plant, on how you divide it. There are some things that are a little more difficult than others.
We put tips on the Lexington Field Gardens Facebook usually about that, usually coming in the summer and fall, because there are a lot of plants that you do need to divide. I planted some foxglove in the sun. Should I move them? The instructions said sunshade. They don't, mine grow in the sun too, Susan. I would just try them, see what happens.
Right.
You know?
Right.
The nice thing about foxgloves is they're biennials, and what you can do once they bloom, I take the stalk. I don't use the flower in a bouquet or anything, and I put the stalk somewhere else where I want more foxglove. So put it in your sunshade area the next time, and they come up there next year. It's a very nice way of spreading the whole thing. It works. Beautiful plantings with seasonal variety and color for each side of my front door with only afternoon sun. Oh, Elaine, you're the decorator.
All right. Can you read that to me again a little slower?
Okay. She would like beautiful plantings with seasonal variety and color for each side of the front door with only afternoon sun.
Okay. Well, you can buy, there's two options here. Are you talking in the ground in beds, or are you going to buy 2 all-season weatherproof containers, or a combination of both might be nice? Not seeing the front entryway, I can't tell you what would look best to me, but if you were just doing in the ground, I would do a combination of some sort of conifer, because again, you won't have, if you have deciduous or things that die back in the winter, it won't look very well for 6 months of the year. So go to the garden center and look in their shrub area and find some conifers, whether it's spruce or pine or juniper or some family, and pick 2 that will be sort of considered dwarf. Nothing is really dwarf, even though they say it is. I mean, eventually it's going to just get really big. But if you need to get something that says that it is dwarf or very slow growing, like 1 inch a year type of thing. So mirror that on either side of your steps, and maybe have 3 elements. I don't know how big this woman's area is, but
yeah, this is a complicated question for you.
I know. So you'd have 3 maybe shrub things that, if say you've got like 6 to 8 feet on each side of the step, you'd have 2 sort of taller things by the steps, and then have something lower to each side of that going out. And then in between, you could have some nice ground cover.
Right.
And I kind of go that route rather than worrying about, if you put a lot of colorful flowers in there, they're going to need deadheading. They're going to need a lot more maintenance than if you put something that's just.
You can get your color in flower pots if you really
Absolutely.
want.
So if she wants color, that's when the 2 containers would come in, maybe in a walkway a little further out, or on either side of a step, on top of the step. And in those containers, you could put the Sophie European geranium there. That was just going to give you beautiful, easy color all season. I think
We need to move on.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, unfortunately, because there are other questions here.
Yes.
If using cardboard and mulch in the fall, will any ground cover I plant now be able to grow, since weeds won't? Weeds won't necessarily not grow. You've killed the weeds from the past, but unfortunately the birds have a way of scattering seeds all over the place. Your lawnmowers will scatter grass seed. You're going to still have to weed, but your ground cover should be able to grow if you pick the right ground cover for the spot. You have something to add to that, Elaine?
No, I don't. No.
I'll give you this one. How can I get rid of the lily of the valley that's invading my lawn?
Okay.
Oh, that's a dreadful one.
Well, I know, unless you have a contained area that you have lily of the valley, and it is going to send out those runners, and it's just going to keep going. How do you get rid of it? Oh boy. Just cutting it is not going to work, because it's what's underground that's causing the spread. I'm not sure if there is a spray or something, if you want to use that sort of thing, that will kill systemically and go down, beyond the leaf and kill the root system. There could be something like that. I kind of stay away from those products now because of all the problems that have come out with using them, but they do have a place, and this might be the place to use it carefully. The only other thing that I would do would be to dig. You dig down, you try to pull up that runner, find out where it is, and just follow it back, and in that way.
The other thing I point out, and they're saying more and more in the native plant places, we shouldn't have lawns. Lawns are not any good for our butterflies and bees and everything else. Well, think about having a lawn, a lily of the valley.
Well, there you go. There you go. And I think for our family, the Scots lawn is sort of a thing of the past. We don't look to have a really good, beautiful green lush lawn. In fact, we took up lawn on one side of our house to make a heather garden, and we put a stone path in, and we put just heather plants and some dwarf conifers in, and we're really enjoying it as a side garden to the house with no lawn now. And the lawn and the rest of our property is just a combination of different grasses, some crabgrass, yes, but we feel like once it's mowed, it's all green and doesn't bother us. But I know
there's beautiful heather instead.
We put heather. Maybe we'll take out more lawn and put another garden in. But the garden you put in to replace the lawn should be low maintenance and something you don't have to really, dote over every 3 days, because you don't want to be out there being a slave to it. So.
If I put my mandevilla plant on my deck, I'm afraid groundhogs will eat the flowers. Any suggestions? I've never had groundhogs eat my mandevilla flowers.
No, especially up on a deck. I don't know that they would do. I've never heard of a groundhog going for mandevilla flowers either.
They will go for your vegetable garden, and they will destroy it.
Absolutely.
If you're really worried, you might put your mandevilla up on something so it's higher. So the groundhog would have to stand on his hind legs to get up even to that, and he won't be able to reach the flowers because the mandevilla grow so tall.
Right. chances are they wouldn't like the taste of mandevilla, because mandevilla is one of those plants that has that white latex sappy stuff when you break it. You know, when you break a stem of it, it kind of seeps that white, that white substance. And I don't think that would be very pleasant for him to chew on. So I have a feeling that—
For groundhogs, I just see an addendum to her question. The groundhogs will come up in the patio and eat petunias.
Oh, well, they're very—
You need to have a heart trap.
Yeah, petunias are more delicious than a mandevilla. Mandevilla, they're not going to go. I really doubt they would eat that because of that latex, white latex stuff that's in the plant.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. So some plants like poinsettias and things, you know, when you break the stem, they seep kind of a sticky white sort of substance. I can't see that would be very pleasant to eat, whereas a petunia is just sort of a very soft and delectable. I've never eaten one, but given the choice, I'd go for the petunia over the mandevilla. So
I know my golden goes for my zinnias. What is an easier way to transplant variegated hosta? Can I put bone meal into whole before planting? Easier way.
An easier way to transplant hosta? Is that what she's asking?
Yeah. I think hosta's easy.
Hosta's pretty easy to transplant. You can divide it when you're transplanting it, if you want to do that. You don't need to put bone meal in the hole. You should always be careful about putting something in a hole and putting bare roots right on top of it, no matter what it is, you know, superphosphate or any of those things. I would mix it with soil in the hole before you put the plant in, because you don't want to burn the roots or have the roots up against something like that. So bone meal won't hurt it if you want to use it, or superphosphate, but I wouldn't put it, like I wouldn't sit the plant right on top of that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And our last question is, I'm so glad you mentioned alternative lawns. Is Irish moss native? I don't dare go on my Google and check that out while I'm on this Zoom thing.
Yeah.
I would check it out on Google and see if Irish moss is native. But the alternative lawns is a really interesting concept, you know, trying to do something different than just having that great big green expanse out there, which doesn't help anybody particularly.
Right.
I mean, not many of us are playing croquet these days.
No. You know, there is a place for the beautiful green lawn, and on large estates, you know, it looks beautiful separating the areas, and it's sort of a relief between gardens. It's a visual relief to have a nice green expanse between a rocky area or two beautiful perennial beds or something. But most properties in Lexington, I'd say, don't really, you know, I don't know if that you really miss having a perfect.
Well, if you look at some of the new houses, they have no lawn at all. The house is right out to the edge of the property.
Right. A lot of houses don't have a great, you know, large property anymore. So.
Oh, wait, I got one more. Is it too late in the season to divide and move plants? No. Oh, keep dividing and moving all season long. There's certain times when you should do it. Don't do the iris now. You wait until after they finish blooming. Don't do the daylilies until after they've bloomed. You usually wait till after they've bloomed. But I would keep dividing and moving and changing things around, having fun with it. Gardens are very forgiving.
Yes.
They're not necessarily like people. They are very forgiving. You can come back the next year and say, this was awful. I'm going to try it this way. Can I divide sedum now? I did.
Sure, yes. I moved some today, this morning. Yep.
Okay, we have about 3 more minutes. If anybody else has another question. I've asked the diet tubers. And otherwise, I thank you, Elaine, for being my guru on this. And it's lovely to have you all come and ask your questions.
Thank you very much. It was lovely to be here and be a part of it. Thank you.
Thank you all for coming as well.
I think you had some questions in the chat, but I don't know if there's anything that you didn't answer.
Oh, wait a minute. Let's see.
Let's look.
I think that they
we'll
got a tendency.
Away. Can you give tips on weed control and divide? We did that. Well, we'll keep groundhogs away. Nothing. You got to get rid of the groundhog, basically. And it's not legal how you get rid of the groundhog.
Right.
So talk to your farmer friend or somebody else, not on public TV. Rabbits do not like blood meal. Okay, that's another thing rabbits don't like. I'm making a shade garden where there was some grass. Do I need to remove all the grass? Yes. Okay, we did look at the garden. Darrell Probst, Probst, in Massachusetts, propagated epinedium. Perhaps look for his name.
Okay.
That's the name somebody came. Apps's plant finder. And that's all the questions I saw, Matt. Okay.
There's one more that just came in, and this is a great ending question too, I think. What's your favorite plant combinations?
Oh, I wonder if that's the Jean who asked about summer and shade. My favorite plant. Well, it depends whether it's in the shade or in the sun.
Right.
In the shade, I love hosta and astilbe and Solomon seal and a few hellebores. And if I don't like my neighbor's fence, so then I put goat's beard in the background. And I thought a shade garden would be boring. It is the most beautiful, lush green thing.
It is. Yeah, I have to agree with that. I love shade gardening.
Yeah.
I do. There's so many things, so many textures and colors, and yeah.
Yeah, you can really do with it. In the sun garden, I like color. So I have crazy color. I merge my plants. I have a dear friend who has a lovely garden, but she has dirt in between each plant. I put my plants there all together so you can't see the weeds underneath. And there's lots and lots of color. What do you do, Elaine, for your favorites?
Well, for my favorites, let's see, in the shade, I mix different varieties of hosta, fern, different wildflowers. I do have some clematis that manages to pop up in there. Again, this is open shade. It's not deep, dark shade. I have woodland peony, a Japanese woodland peony, which is just a great performer. That does well there. And we've mixed in some dwarf mountain laurel as well here and there. And so there's quite a few. I have some small Japanese maples. What else? So there's a lot of different color and texture and levels, heights, things.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's probably my favorite shade type combination. In the sun, I mix, the sedums are very nice to use, and the conifers, and I don't do a lot with annuals in the ground anymore. And when I want color, I'll put in a large pot filled with annuals. And that gives me sort of the choice of changing that out every year, and it just concentrates the color into one spot. And I've just come to like that. I don't do a lot with bedding anymore, bedding annuals.
When I bought this house many, many years ago, I found under piles of trash and stuff, I had been told there were no gardens. There were peonies planted here.
Oh.
The peonies were planted in 1913, which was absolutely amazing to me. These peonies were over 100 years old, older than I. And you think, oh my, and I've divided those peonies, we've moved those peonies. Gardens can keep forgiving, and they keep going on, and they keep giving and giving to you.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm thinking of what Elaine's garden, I want to go up and see it again, just with all the little trees in there, the small mountain laurel and so forth that you talked about. Have fun with your garden. This is a place where you can experiment, and you can enjoy that experiment for a long time.
Yes.
Do enjoy. Lexington Field Garden Club is here for you whenever you want. Goodbye, all.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.